Pokémon Go was something of a flash in the pan in the summer of 2016. Google did that goofy April Fool's Day Pokemon catching Google Maps event where you could locate Pokemon on the map and collect them, which ended up being a test run to gauge public interest in the idea of a Pokemon catching mobile game. Rumors had been circulating that Niantic, a small startup company obscurely known for their work on the sci-fi augmented reality phone game Ingress, would be partnering with the Pokemon company to create what sounded like a mobile Pokemon game featuring battles and the ability to catch wild Pokemon in the real world. I dismissed it at the time, especially after seeing the trailer with a bunch of people playing what looked like a real-world virtual reality simulation, throwing actual physical yet digital Pokeballs at cyber creatures interacting with real environments. I'm getting to be more of a buzzkill as I get older, but even I understood that this was just a concept trailer to whet players' appetites and get them excited at the prospect of playing Pokemon in real life. But I'd seen these sorts of things before. If something sounds too good to be true, it probably is. Normal players who saw it were clearly too dense to realize this was a hyperbolic trailer, and that no, the technology to see digital creatures in the physical world has yet to exist without the help of an augmented reality headset like the yet-to-be commercially available Microsoft HoloLens. By the way, Nintendo, can you get on this shit? Please and thank you. Cut to the summer of 2016, and the game launched rather stealthily on July 6, 2016. It had a lot of glitches and other issues that frustrated players, but understanding that every massively multiplayer online game must have their servers stress tested, and that there's no way to test the server stability of a game of that magnitude without unleashing it to the masses first, I was patient and optimistic. I went from a dude that scornfully scoffed at the concept of Pokemon Go and looked forward to it failing so that I could tell my friends I told you so, that I was smart for not getting my hopes up, to someone who was having so much fun exploring my local areas, meeting people, and catching Pokemon along the way, that I was willing to forgive so many of its shortcomings from the get-go. Now, I know that Niantic was a pretty small company of like 30 people back when they were working on Ingress, and I still think it's amazing what they managed to pull off for an augmented reality project of that scale, at that time, on such limited hardware. People tend to see big game companies like Nintendo and Square Enix as either incompetent or intentionally negligent when problems arise. And in the case of giant companies, it's usually a matter of poor management and corporate suits being too focused on the profit motive rather than managing a game that's going to resonate with the youths. Pokemon Go's launch was kind of insane. You had people from all walks of life trying out this free-to-play phone game, from parents, office workers, millennials like myself, and even police officers playing the game when they had a moment of free time. I had a few scenarios where I was taking over a gym, a police officer rolled up behind me, I got nervous and drove away, and moments later I'd see the gym change colors. Fucking pigs. Of course, Pokemon Go rode on Ingress's shoulders, as it imported a lot of data and landmarks from its predecessor and placed it into Pokemon Go. While Ingress may have been a generic sci-fi augmented reality game all about territory control and warring factions, Pokemon Go improved upon the model by making it about collection and combat. In my neck of the woods, which at the time of Pokemon Go's release was Atlanta, Georgia, I would often go to an outdoor mall in Sandy Springs known simply as The Prado. I originally saw a ton of Pokestops just glowing with lures, and when I went to the area, I met a bunch of people my age who were also consistently playing the game. They use these things known as scanners, a website that hacks into the game's code and tells you when and where Pokemon with certain stats and abilities will appear. It was great fun. Whenever someone would shout about a rare Dratini spawn across the street, we would all run up to the intersection and take turns recklessly sprinting across the highway, giggling and screaming the entire time. When a Snorlax would spawn a few minutes away with several minutes left, it became a loud, frenzied attempt to stuff as many of us in the car as we could before we take a bunch of illegal U-turns and park on the grass to get out and try and catch it before it despawned. We heard a 100% Charmander spawned in a nearby neighborhood, which had us slowly go down a very steep dirt path, holding onto tree branches as well as each other to ensure nobody would fall and stain their clothes. I did this several times and became known as the clumsy guy who had a bunch of dirt stains on his clothes, but I was happy as long as nobody else was falling. We made it a habit of bringing lawn chairs and drinks and cigarettes and turned the Prado into our own little trainer society, since there were 3 or 4 Pokestops overlapping, and we got to just sit there and farm for items. Eventually, the owner of a nearby sushi restaurant took it upon himself to carve out a certain part of the parking lot to be inaccessible to cars, and as a result, some of the more wealthy attendees set up a giant tent with radiators and multiple Bluetooth speakers. There were parents bringing their young children who would also play the game, along with the previously mentioned group of 20-somethings that seemed to be at the Prado anytime they weren't working at their job or sleeping. There was little competition between the power players in our group to see who could hit the max level quickest, and every time someone hit level 40, a regular in our group would stitch them a cute little t-shirt with their username and the words level 40 on the back. I even met a cute girl at the time who was also playing the game, and as we got closer in our relationship, the ridiculous antics surrounding us served as a nostalgic backdrop for she and I to look back on. A fun summer romance I hadn't experienced in years, where we adventured in the woods looking for monsters to capture and felt like little kids again. At least that was when the game hit its peak. Eventually, Niantic started cracking down on scanners, shutting them off completely. Sometimes they would come back for a little while, but Niantic would always come down on them harder the next time. It ended with Yang Liu, the creator of the biggest tracker at the time, Pokevision, penning an open letter to Niantic and John Hank, pointing out their negligence in the continued maintenance of the game and the fact that their in-game footstep tracker had been broken for multiple weeks, and that his scanner served as a stopgap until Niantic got their shit together. Eventually, Niantic removed the in-game tracker completely until they got it working again, but by that point, the damage was done. They made the fair claim that the data transfers necessary to make Pokevision work was putting an unnecessary amount of strain on the servers and making the game break for everyone else, but players didn't care. They had the ability to find out where Pokemon were located and get them exactly as promised, when suddenly Niantic shut down these sites and didn't replace it with a functioning alternative for months. To them, Niantic was a negligent owner that didn't care about its player base, and considering the lack of community engagement and transparency, many people got burned out and left. The Prado got dismantled, and all the Pokestops were removed. Several months later, Niantic dropped an update that allowed you to catch Pokemon from the second generation games, Gold, Silver, and Crystal, as well as eventually adding a friends list with the ability to gift items. But for a number of people, this wasn't a good enough reason to come back.
Is this real? I can't believe it. Oh wait! No one cares anymore, Niantic. You took too long. You took too long. You're gonna revitalize your game for a week, tops.
While other mobile games will add weekly or monthly content, Niantic took more than half a year to give loyal players a compelling reason to keep going. They were still flustered by Niantic's decision to make the game fair across the board, but slowly, surely, players started coming back. So the question is, how many players are currently playing the game on a daily basis? Believe it or not, 147 million according to superdataresearch.com. And an even more surprising fact is that the current Pokemon Go player base is larger than it was when the game first launched. Put that in your Pokeflute and blow it. I'm not really ashamed to say that I've been playing Pokemon Go consistently since launch. It was something that held a bit of charm, or at least enough to get me in the habit of hooking up my Pokemon Go Plus accessory and leaving it on silently while I run errands or walk around at work. Of course, I'm not under the illusion that Pokemon Go will ever be able to touch any of the actual main games. The thing that makes Pokemon Go kinda shitty are other basic aspects that you've come to learn from mobile games. There's no real story to speak of, there's limited social and avatar involvement, and you have to grind a lot. The grinding doesn't lead to anything but more grinding. And once you hit the maximum level, it's all about staying current and catching the latest legendary monsters. There are dreaded microtransactions, and while the game doesn't technically make you spend any money on it, it'll certainly keep you in a chokehold until you pull out your credit card out of frustration. Here's how I've done the mathematical conversion. I live in Texas, where there's a lot of mosquitoes outside, and even if I step out for a moment, 5 of the little shits will latch onto my elbow and bite me discreetly. But at the same time, I don't want to rub probably carcinogenic bug repellent on my entire body every time I want to go out and hunt for virtual monsters. So what I'll usually do is hop in my car and drive to nearby Pokestops and gyms, put my car in park, and catch everything in sight. And when I'm done, I'll drive to the next one and do the same thing, eventually getting bored after about 30 minutes and driving home. In short, when I play Pokemon Go, I have to drive to make actual progress, which not only costs gas, but puts miles on my car, but also means I'm spending a decent chunk of time on a half-baked phone game when I could otherwise be working on videos and scripts, or grinding my hunter rank and rare item parts in Monster Hunter World. Look, I had to mention Monster Hunter somewhere in this video, okay? Just let me have my obsessions. I can go out all day on Saturday and play Pokemon Go to try and get candy for my legendary Pokemon, hatch eggs, farm Stardust, and stock up on items from Pokestops. Or I can just stay home and play computer games. Seems like a no-brainer for anyone with all their vital organs intact. This results in me playing Pokemon Go passively instead of actively, meaning I'll try to hit Pokestops on my way to work or when I'm out at a mall with friends, rather than walking or driving around with the sole intention of taking down gyms, hunting down rare Pokemon, etc. In short, playing Pokemon Go makes me a very antisocial person. There's a big area loaded with Pokestops near where I live where players will congregate during events and on their lunch breaks, but other than that, the sleepy suburb I live in doesn't have a crazy scene like Atlanta did. The most interaction I get is when I take down a gym and I see another player drive behind me slowly, thinking it's a cop with civilian plates about to pull me over for loitering in a church parking lot, when suddenly I'll see my gym grow a little bit and realize they were a fellow Instinct trainer who just added their Pokemon. But beyond receiving gifts from players on my friends list, it's a lonely little quasi-multiplayer mobile game that sees almost no interaction between real human beings in real time. My main issue with Pokemon Go is how lazy the original thing feels. You have the music composed by Junichi Masuda, the original composer for most of the series, a legend all things considered. So what kind of music quality does he produce? Take a listen. First of all, beyond any criticism with the composition itself, the audio quality is really bad, like uncommonly bad for music heard on a mobile app. For comparison, here's some music played in other phone games, which sound much more crisp when listened to side by side. Additionally, all the sound effects in Pokemon Go are extremely grating, especially if you have them turned up. Other games like Fire Emblem Heroes don't have this problem thanks to all of the gentle, rounded-off UI sound effects that sound very refined and calming. Then you launch Pokemon Go and it just has these clangs and pop-up sounds that couldn't sound any more obnoxious if you tried. I mean, luckily you can turn off both the music and sound effects, but I wish there was a better compromise. I tried importing a bunch of the original Game Boy OST sound files onto my phone, but it turns out those old music files are kinda glitchy and don't play nice with iTunes. It would be amazing and totally not out of the question for Niantic to import some original Pokemon music into the game in a loopable format. Hell, they could even charge you real money for it like I know they would, and I'd totally pay $5 for it just because of how much it would improve my time spent playing this repetitive, tedious phone game which utilizes an intellectual property that's very near and dear to my heart. Here's some other examples of musical choices that could help Pokemon Go cast a veil over the fact that it isn't up to snuff with the main series of games. I want to address that I do enjoy certain aspects of the game. While I don't enjoy the main theme music that plays during the day, I appreciate Niantic adding some varied music for different situations. I really enjoyed when they came out with a remixed Lavender Town theme where they increased ghost Pokemon spawn rates during October of 2017, despite the music once again being incredibly low quality and compressed. I think Niantic did a pretty good job translating a portable game series into an app form and adding the traditional infrastructure and gameplay elements that we've come to know from other mobile games. And it's safe to say that they've crafted and, eventually, maintained a dedicated player base. The Pokemon Company prints money as is, so it's fair to suggest that Niantic is resting on Nintendo's well-established laurels. But I genuinely think the team involved cares about making a fun experience and adding new features once they've had the time to properly implement it. There might be other behind-the-scenes factors that prevent the development team from having more creative freedom with the app than they currently do, but at the moment I think they're doing a serviceable job. The main problem with Pokemon Go is that, despite sharing the same name and some reincorporated melodies, it's just not Pokemon. After playing it enough, you don't see it as a wild, bustling world with creatures hiding around every corner, as is conveyed in the game trailers, but more as a dressed-up version of Google Maps with some 3D models and inventory system thrown in which you lazily throw some Great Balls at a bunch of common Pokemon, evolve monsters to get the experience points, and then throw them away to free up inventory space. Was there a reason Niantic needed to take one of the most imaginative, exciting, and bold IPs and turn it into the least engaging local multiplayer mobile game possible? Okay, maybe that's a bit harsh. I will admit that Pokemon Go is great in the sense that it lends an air of adventure to what would otherwise be a tedious errand, transforming a dull trip to the DMV into a chance to discover what kinds of Pokemon are around my area. But the problem is that once that sense of discovery is dampened, you're just left with a grind. The combat system is in real time with fast moves and charge moves, with the former being a normal tap attack, and the latter being a more powerful move that becomes charged after dealing damage or enduring big hits. I guess they wanted to appeal to more mainstream players who are apparently violently allergic to turn-based combat and deep battle mechanics in favor of delayed, oftentimes glitchy real-time combat that have you swiping and tapping like a pervert playing an imported erotic Nintendo 3DS game. Legendaries, arguably the only compelling part of the game aside from completing your Pokédex, require players to go to a public place, hope enough active players are nearby, and team up with total strangers to take them down in a multiplayer battle known as a raid. They advertise this as a really cool fight in the initial trailer, but in reality you just stand around and tap your phone silently next to middle-aged people doing the same, hoping the Pokemon's health will go down fast enough before the timer runs out. It recommends that Mewtwo's legendary raid requires 20 people. While I live in a moderately populated suburb, if I'm lucky, 3 people will show up, even when a new update comes out and everyone's actively playing. It's safe to say I don't bother unless the opportunity happens to fall in my lap, since while I do care about getting rare Pokemon, the moment I have to coordinate with other people in real life, it's so inconvenient and gated off by outside factors that I just can't muster up the will to do so. The most annoying thing possible is how Niantic is only 2 years after the game originally came out, gradually adding cosmetic options at the speed of smell. I remember when they first announced a few pieces of clothing for players to buy with coins. I saw everyone in the area wearing a sport coat and fedora when I'd go to take down a gym, making a feature meant to give a sense of individuality to players, ending with every avatar looking effectively the same. A couple of things. Why is there no option to change my hairstyle? Every guy in the entire game has spiky Asian hair, and every girl has a ponytail. I don't want to make my default avatar look slightly more stylish than all the other generic-looking trainers in the game. I want to stand out and look like a digital extension of myself. Give me a faux hawk, give me the ability to change specific colors on every outfit, give me different default facial expressions. Jesus, dude, this is the kind of stuff that other microtransaction-heavy games figured out immediately. Why is Pokemon Go slower than Animal Crossing Pocket Camp to give your character the ability to change their hairstyle? As mentioned earlier, Niantic is good at intentionally forcing players to buy microtransactions. You can occasionally get eggs from spinning Pokéstops and getting gifts from players on your friends list, but you only get one incubator with infinite uses. Every other egg incubator gets 3 uses, whether it's the normal one or the super incubator that shortens the total distance needed to hatch eggs. There are certain Pokemon, like Alolan forms of Sandshrew and Vulpix, that you can only get from eggs. But more than that, you have the recent event that allowed players to catch region-exclusive Pokemon like Mr. Mime, Kangaskhan, and Farfetch'd. Let's say you only want to hatch Alolan eggs, but you have a bunch of 2km and 5km eggs. Wouldn't you want to throw them away and hatch the more important eggs, since you can toss revives and potions and other basic items you don't want to waste space on? Well, no, you can't. You have to abstain from spinning Pokéstops in order to limit how many eggs you have, or you have to slowly use your permanent incubator to hatch eggs one by one while you clean up your egg supply, and concurrently starve yourself of Pokeballs with which to catch said mons. So essentially the game tries to aggravate you into spending money on incubators if you really care about getting certain uncommon Pokemon. On top of that, the catch rate for rare event Pokemon are so abysmally low that it's hard to defend Niantic from accusations of greed. I found a post on the Sylph Road subreddit that gathered extensive data and approximated your likelihood of catching a Farfetch'd, previously an Australia exclusive regional Pokemon, at the abysmal percentage of 0.0225%, meaning you'd have to hatch 161 eggs to have a 95% chance of catching a single one, meaning you'd have to buy at least 53 incubators. Needless to say, this can get quite expensive, and as a result, I don't really care about getting it. The game becomes significantly more enjoyable, as does literally anything, if you play with a friend on a regular basis. Double points if you're both on the same team and you can work together to take down gyms at a rapid pace. But being a YouTube boy who doesn't leave his computer much and only associates with other local YouTube and voice actor friends, I often find myself painfully low on friends with low enough self-respect willing to go play a phone game in groups on any semi-regular basis. You might say, oh ChaseFace, you're being dramatic. There are Facebook groups for local Pokemon Go players in your area. Oh yes, my little YouTube objector, let me tell you, I can't think of anything more compelling than meeting people on Facebook who are heavily invested in mobile games. My favorite types include fat hairy guy with no day job, single parent with an unhealthy need for escapism, and emotionally underdeveloped old lady with expendable income and an excessive amount of free time. So yeah, I'm good. Pokemon Go isn't dead, but it certainly feels like it despite the high player count. I think the problem is that more people don't want to leave the safety of their car at night, or leave behind their wonderful air conditioning on a blisteringly hot summer day. That means every other trainer is sectioned off in a temperature-controlled box, usually driving with their partner or kids. And if you try to approach them in any capacity, they'll feel like their personal bubble has just been invaded, and while you might be a well-intentioned trainer that's just trying to make local friends, you'll ultimately end up looking like a potential rapist. I can't say I blame them, since actual crazy people have used Pokemon Go to lure unsuspecting victims to their location. I'm a stay-at-home kind of guy who only leaves my house for specific reasons like haircuts, doctor's appointments, and restocking my food supply. So it's safe to say I'm more of a homebody than most people who might go out on the weekends and find themselves in social situations that could double as opportunities to catch digital creatures. I genuinely hope they find ways to freshen up the game and cater to the more traditional gaming crowd, because as it stands right now, the audience seems to be torn evenly down the middle between self-conscious, ashamed casual players and socially inept hardcores who don't realize how weird it is to be passionately invested in a spin-off mobile game. It's kind of like trying to explain to your friends and family that My Little Pony isn't for little girls. Yeah, I think that's a fair comparison, actually. At the time of this video's creation, Niantic just rolled out an update with a handful of Sinnoh Pokemon like Turtwig, Piplup, and Chimchar. And while that gets me excited to go catch a bunch of little penguins and evolve it into a big regal-looking fucker, the problems will soon resume. Niantic will starve you of incubators, gym battles will continue to be an unrewarding grind, and you'll be reminded that you're playing a phone game when you could be enjoying other, more rewarding hobbies. I say that knowing I'll still open up the Pokemon Go app several times a day and catch whatever spawns around my house, but even then I'm not having as much fun as I could be. I really want more features, maybe some mini-games a la Pokemon Stadium or Pokémon Ami, that would give players more exciting means of earning Stardust or candy. I think field research and research tasks are a nice way to incentivize players to play more often, but they generally boil down to, hey, do that thing you were going to do anyway, but you'll get a berry for it. I want a sense of identity, an air of nostalgia or excitement, a reason to be more open about my interest in an ambitious yet flawed phone game. I think Meltan might be the absolute lamest mythical Pokemon ever made, and the cutscenes they used to premiere his existence look like it was made in Source Filmmaker, with Professor Oak looking like a chibi character and Professor Willow looking Like he does. Maybe it's a bait and switch to introduce a more interesting, aesthetically pleasing legendary, but whoever combined a gray ditto with a gear on its head and slapped the word mythical on it should be euthanized. I'm not joking when I say that. Bring him to me, and I will deliver swift, righteous judgment. I don't normally include end credits narration, but I wanted to give a big shout out to my artist Dr. Crafty for being available on such short notice to help me out with all the art used in this video. If you like his style, he has a channel that you can check out by clicking on his green icon on screen. He's a big part of the show and I couldn't do it without him. So if you want to check out his rapidly uploaded and well-produced videos, please consider subscribing to him. Thanks for watching, and take care.